By the way, on the subject of the Saudi Arabia show, and I'm all Saudi'd out with this whole event and the fallout from the event, so hopefully this is the last I'll even talk about it. But I'm not one to usually call out Jim Ross for anything, because more often than not, I agree with JR. I respect the hell out of JR. But he said something on his podcast this week that really just rubbed me the wrong way. And really, it just came across as being completely tone deaf. So he was talking very briefly in reference to the story that was making the rounds, that WWE paid its female talent for the Greatest Royal Rumble show, even though they were not on the show. They weren't even flown to Saudi Arabia. But supposedly WWE paid them anyway. Obviously, this had to do with the Saudis not wanting, or WWE feeling as though they would not want the women on the show. It was not their choice. The women just were told, you're not being flown over for the show, and that was that. They were left off, and according to Jerry Lawler, and Lawler was the first person who I heard mention this a few weeks ago on his podcast, and Mike Johnson on PW Insider later on independently verified this with his own sources in the company, that the women were in fact paid. I don't know how much. I don't know if maybe they haven't been paid yet. Maybe they will. Maybe the money hasn't come in from the show yet. I don't know. But they either have been or will be paid for the show. By the way, if I could just really quickly just detour here for a second. I mentioned Lawler. Jerry Lawler is probably the luckiest guy alive right now. On his podcast, he had a follow-up CAT scan, he said. Because if you remember, he suffered a stroke few weeks ago. You would never know. But before WrestleMania, like 2 weeks before, he suffered a stroke. And so he had a follow-up CAT scan this past week, and the CAT scan showed that he suffered brain damage. The doctor showed him on his scan like a quarter-size spot that had been filled by blood, and I guess the blood has since been absorbed into the brain, and it killed some of the cells, and you can see it on the CAT scan. He said he was going to tweet a picture of it out. I don't know if he ever did or not, but the doctor said, yeah, that's brain damage. And if that spot was just a little further down, a little deeper into the brain, you would have no use of the left side of your body. It just so happens that it's in a spot where it has not affected him. He's had no residual effects from the stroke whatsoever. And so he's a very fortunate man. So I just wanted to mention that. But anyway, this was Jim Ross's response. This is what he said on his show in reference to the news that the women were reportedly being paid for the Saudi Arabia show. He said, I don't know why it would be that way. It's not everybody's right to be on any card. You earn your right to be on the card. And the women have done a phenomenal job, and I am a big supporter of women's athletics in general. Hey, I'm a season ticket holder to the OU women's basketball games, but I believe the same thing as I do about WrestleMania. It's not your birthright to be booked. It's like playing in the Super Bowl. It's not your right as an NFL player. You earn that right to get into that game. I don't know if they were paid or not. I don't know why they would have been paid, and I may piss some people off, but I'm just being honest. And he is certainly entitled to his opinion. The problem, of course, with what he's saying isn't that he's expressing an opinion. It is that the entire reason the women were not on the show has nothing at all to do with them not earning their spot on the show. It had everything to do with WWE running a show in a place where women's wrestling is just not welcome. They made the choice that the money was too good to turn down. Breaking into new markets is something they want to do more of, and so they made a deal with the devil, and they took the money and they did the show. And they're going to be doing more shows. And guess what? If they come back in November, the women ain't going to be on that show either. That was the deal that they made. I mean, for God's sakes, they ran an ad during the show in Saudi Arabia for the next pay-per-view that included some of the women in their gear. And it nearly blew up the entire relationship. This was like a big scandal. They had to put out a statement about how upset they were. They publicly chastised WWE for it. Now, I actually agree with JR when it comes to WrestleMania and shows like that. People should, again, what does that even really mean, I guess, when it comes to pro wrestling? They should earn their way onto the card. I mean, I'm a believer that WWE shouldn't just feel compelled to fit everybody onto the WrestleMania card and make it so bloated. You know, I think he's got a point in that way. He's not wrong on that. But here, he just sounds completely out of touch. I was amazed at how out of touch he sounded making that statement, and he just doesn't know what he's talking about. He came across like he just did not know what he was talking about. How can they earn a spot on the show when they weren't even allowed to fly over in the first place? Renee Young couldn't even get a spot on the show, fully dressed, holding a microphone in her hand. And again, we don't know for sure if that was just WWE being cautious and they made the call and it wasn't a conversation they ever really had with the Saudis. They just felt like, you know what? We get the sense that this may be something that's frowned upon, so we're just not going to fly any of the female talent over. We don't know if that was specifically something that the royal family said to them. No, they're not allowed. But either way, the decision was made that we're not going to fly them over. They're not welcome here, and we're not going to fly them over. Even somebody like Renee Young, like a ring announcer, a backstage interviewer, having her sit and do the pre-show panel. No, they had Byron Saxton get it from the announce booth and go do it. And they couldn't even have someone like her or someone like, Charlie Caruso there to do it. They should earn their spot. What the hell does that even mean? So that was very disappointing to hear him say that. You know, whether you agree with the women getting paid or not is not even the point. That's almost like an afterthought. That's not even the point of what I'm saying. It's the basis for his argument makes no sense.